You're watching Sky today. It's 10 o'clock. These are the headlines. The US and Iran agree a temporary ceasefire and the Strait of Hormuz reopens for now as President Trump claims complete victory in a phone call with Sky News.
It wasn't a long call, about a minute and a half, but it had some real substance for sure.
The world breathes a sigh of relief over the temporary truce after Iranians formed human chains at bridges and power plants before the deal was announced. But Israel insists its war against Hezbollah in Lebanon will go on and issues evacuation warnings for 7 Beirut neighborhoods. Stock markets soar and the price of oil falls back below $100 off the back of the ceasefire agreement. And here, Sir Keir Starmer welcomes the latest developments as he heads to the Middle East to boost diplomatic efforts with Gulf allies. Very good morning to you. Donald Trump's declared complete victory in the war in Iran during a phone call with Sky News. Speaking to our US correspondent Mark Stone, the US president welcomed the 2-week ceasefire that was announced last night and told us all military objectives in Iran had been met. The ceasefire between the two countries was announced shortly before Mr. Trump's deadline for a deal expired. Let's hear first from Mark about the phone call with the president.
Well, I've just got off the phone with President Trump. It wasn't a long call, about a minute and a half, but it had some real substance for sure. It came just a few hours after he'd pulled back from the brink and announced a ceasefire in Iran. It's great, he told me. It's very good. He then claimed that all the military objectives had been achieved in Iran. We've done everything we wanted to do militarily. And he declared it a complete victory. It was less than 24 hours earlier that the president was threatening that a whole civilization would die. His words, he was threatening to destroy Iran's power plants and bridges. But from that, suddenly, overnight, came a pause in fighting, a ceasefire, 2 weeks, announced by him just before his own deadline. And 2 hours before my call. We got word from the Iranians too, but they claimed that the Americans had agreed to open negotiations on Iran's maximalist 10-point plan. That, importantly, includes Iran taking operational control of the Strait of Hormuz, the removal of all sanctions, and all American troops leaving the Middle East. All wildly undeliverable demands, but all here in a statement released by the Iranian Supreme National Security Council and circulated by Iranian state media. And yet President Trump had said in his post before I spoke to him, we received a 10-point proposal from Iran and believe it is a workable basis on which to negotiate. So, on the phone, I put it to the president that surely these were not actually workable proposals that America could agree on. He said, "You don't know what the points are. I know what they are." Intriguingly, he added that many of the points were very good and that most of them had been fully negotiated. And so he's disputing the Iranian position here, suggesting that negotiations are well developed already and that they're not the maximalist demands Iran is claiming. He warned too that if it isn't good, we'll go right back to it very easily. He didn't hang on for long. I have to get off now, Mark, he said.
Mark Stone with that exclusive call with the President of the United States. Well, let's take a look at how events unfolded last night. Just before midnight, President Trump said this, subject to the Islamic Republic of Iran agreeing to the complete, immediate and safe opening of the Strait of Hormuz, I agree to suspend the bombing and attack of Iran for a period of 2 weeks. This will be a double-sided ceasefire. The reason for doing so is that we have already met and exceeded all military objectives and are very far along with a definitive agreement concerning long-term peace with Iran and peace in the Middle East. We have received a 10-point proposal from Iran and believe it is a workable basis on which to negotiate. At 5 a.m. UK time, he posted this, a big day for world peace. Iran wants it to happen. They've had enough. Likewise, so has everyone else. The United States of America will be helping with the traffic build-up in the Strait of Hormuz. There will be lots of positive action. Big money can be made. Iran can start the reconstruction process. We'll be loading up with supplies of all kinds and just hanging around in order to make sure that everything goes well. I feel confident that it will. Just like we're experiencing in the US, this could be the golden age of the Middle East. President Donald J. Trump. Well, according to Iranian state media, this is the 10-point plan. Controlled passage for ships through the Strait of Hormuz in coordination with Iran's armed forces, and the establishment of a secure transit protocol in the strait, ensuring Iran's control of the waterway. The war would be ended against all members of what Iran calls the axis of resistance, including attacks in Lebanon and Yemen. And US combat forces would withdraw from all bases and positions in the region. There'd also be full compensation paid for damages to Iran and the removal of all primary and secondary sanctions against the country. All Iranian assets frozen abroad will be released back to Tehran, and all the provisions of the ceasefire will be adopted in a binding UN Security Council resolution. Iran says the resolution would make all the agreements legally binding under international law, granting it what it calls a unique economic and geopolitical position. Earlier this morning, my colleagues Anna Jones and Kamali Melbourne spoke to Mark Stone about the phone call that he had with the president.
If, as many are arguing, Donald Trump has capitulated and is effectively giving in to these maximalist demands, and they are maximalist demands, I mean, you outline them there. The 10-point plan includes, for example, all US soldiers, troops leaving the Middle East, not just those who have been put there as part of this war, but all of them, to go back to the United States. It includes the idea that Iran would control the Strait of Hormuz, something they've never done before, but suddenly they would get the power to do that. It includes the relief of sanctions and money to rebuild Iran. All of this stuff is surely not something that the Americans would ever sign up to. And yet, in his post, President Trump said that the basis of the 10-point plan is the basis on which they can conduct a negotiation, which is absolutely remarkable. So that was one thing clearly I wanted to put to him. But the president is, it's pretty unusual to be able to have a number and to call a world leader, let alone the American president. It's kind of a strange art, if you like. You don't want to go in there hard with a hard question initially because you could just hang up. So I went in first and said to him, look, how are you feeling about this ceasefire you appear to have secured? And he said, very good, very happy about it. He went on to say, we've secured a complete victory from the military standpoint and from every other standpoint. I then wanted to ask him, look, what about this 10-point plan? Because surely this is not something you can sign up to as the United States. And this is where it was very interesting, because he said, you haven't seen the 10 points. I have seen them. I can't talk about it, but I've seen them, and they are all good points. He went on to say that many of them are already negotiated. So is he talking about some new 10-point plan that the Iranians are privately showing him but not publishing publicly? Because remember, overnight the Iranians have published this plan. It is the 10 points. It's the maximalist stuff that the Americans could never agree to. So I think that was very interesting. But of course, as ever with President Trump, he was controlling the call, and he said very quickly at that point, about a minute and a half into our conversation, but look, Mark, I've got to go now. Thanks very much. And that was the end of the call. So a hint, certainly, of what might be going on behind the scenes, but certainly a very different position publicly, what we're seeing from the Iranians on one side and the Americans, and then this idea that there could perhaps be two different 10-point plans, or at least Trump is perhaps misrepresenting it or maybe misunderstanding it. Who knows?
Interesting, and it sounds like he was pretty upbeat in his call to you, and certainly the reaction from world leaders so far has been a positive one, a sense of relief that the Strait is reopening. But essentially this is another delay, and more negotiation needs to happen, and potentially really hard negotiation to achieve a lasting peace.
Yeah, I mean, actually, one US diplomat, former diplomat, was on the US networks overnight as they were sort of absorbing what has happened. And he came up with a very neat phrase. He said, look, the idea that you can negotiate even a a deliverable agreement between the Americans and the Iranians in 2 weeks, which is what Donald Trump is claiming can happen. You would have to drink Red Bull, so said this guy, every day, and you still wouldn't be able to have the energy and the ability to deliver this deal. It's impossible to do it in 2 weeks. It took 18 months for the people who negotiated the Obama deal just to get to the point where they were ready to start negotiating. I mean, it's really very hard to see how it can be done in 2 weeks, even if the positions were close, and they don't appear to be remotely close. I think what Donald Trump has done, frankly, is to kick an almighty can 2 weeks down the road, and there will be a problem in 2 weeks, a problem that exists now and has just been delayed. It doesn't appear clear to me that the two sides are remotely close. But it is really important to say that in the short term, it is the case, with the exception of Israel and Lebanon, and that's a big humanitarian challenge. With that exception, it is the case that the Americans are not currently bombing in Iran. That is a positive development. The Iranians appear to have stopped firing missiles out of Iran. That is a positive development. And just maybe the Strait of Hormuz is going to open up, which for all of us, for energy prices globally, is clearly a very positive development.
Well, despite the US and Iran saying they had reached a 2-week ceasefire, missile alerts are continuing to have been heard in Saudi Arabia, Bahrain and Kuwait. Joining us now, our correspondent Sally Lockwood, who joins us from Dubai. And Sally, this story has taken in throughout the entirety of its progress more than just Iran and the US. It has focused so heavily and been felt so heavily by Gulf states too. What is the latest situation and what is the latest reaction?
It's huge relief here today. I cannot overstate the level of concern and fear being felt among people in the region last night. I received so many messages on social media from people who have been following our coverage across the Gulf, saying just how concerned they were, how scared they were, how they were taking precautions for their family members at home. One person told me that they'd been making phone calls to relatives back home in the UK because they felt like something terrible was going to happen last night. German and Dutch residents got in touch with me to say that they'd received emails from their embassies essentially warning them, if you don't need to be in the country anymore, then we advise you to leave and to get out while you still can. You know, people went to bed here last night reading threats of annihilation from the US president, only to wake this morning to hear his declaration that this is a big day for world peace. It is a huge relief to people here. But it's worth mentioning that even after that ceasefire was announced overnight, we still received emergency alerts here for incoming missiles. And there were incoming missiles and incoming fire across the region, reported in Kuwait, Bahrain, Saudi, Qatar overnight. So it feels like it's going to be very fragile, and it's going to be quite a tense waiting game for Gulf states to see if this really does materialise into some sort of peace after daily attacks for 5.5 weeks now. And in another significant development overnight, reports from officials in Abu Dhabi that there was another fire at Habshan gas facilities in Abu Dhabi, the second such incident in a matter of days. And of course, it's those energy facilities and that critical infrastructure that Iran was threatening to target if the US did escalate this war, as Donald Trump was threatening. So certainly Gulf states will be watching this situation extremely closely. This will be fragile, but it's certainly very welcome news. And I think it's a similar situation when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz. Extremely welcome news for world energy markets that commercial shipping appears to be resuming in the Strait of Hormuz today. Extremely important for vulnerable countries who've already felt very real world impacts of this war, with countries like the Philippines, like Indonesia, already cutting back on things like school food programs due to the cost of fuel and food because of this war. And make no mistake, Iran still appears to maintain control over the Strait of Hormuz. I spoke to a security source in this region this morning who specialises in commercial shipping, and they said to me, for the US to now essentially say that the Strait of Hormuz has reopened, it is a face-saving exercise for them, because if you look at the conditions of this, in reality, Iran is still maintaining control by using the Iranian military to essentially escort vessels through the Strait of Hormuz. And they say that they're doing this in coordination with Oman, somehow trying to legitimize this control. And on top of that, they're continuing to charge tolls for safe passage. And this is something that only started during the war. This was not something that Iran had the power to do beforehand, to charge safe passage, an eye-watering $2 million reportedly per vessel. But it seems that they're going to continue doing this. So that is something of a victory for Iran when it comes to this war. It's going to be very interesting to see how this all plays out at the negotiating table when the parties are due to meet, hopefully, on Friday in Islamabad. But certainly it's predictable that both sides, both America and Iran, are rushing to declare this some sort of victory today when it comes to this ceasefire. But I think for the most part, people in this region are just focusing on the fact that we might see now some respite in this fighting, a huge relief for everyone in this region, perhaps except for Benjamin Netanyahu, who will have had no choice but to have accepted this ceasefire.
Sally, live in Dubai, good to see you. Thank you so much. Well, there may be a 2-week ceasefire between Iran and the US, but as Sally was saying, Israel's continuing its operations against the Iran-backed Hezbollah group in Lebanon. 8 people have been killed in the coastal city of Sidon, according to Lebanon's health ministry. Another 22 wounded. Israel's Prime Minister has said the ceasefire doesn't extend to Lebanon. Our international correspondent Diana Magne reports on the intricacies of the ceasefire deal.
The IDF continuing their strikes, as you just reported, and evacuation orders around the town of Tyre, and people killed already this morning. So they feel very much that their fight against Hezbollah is separate and will continue. Now, this is not what the Iranians wanted. It's not what they talked about in their initial ceasefire proposal, and it's not in what they're saying in the 10 points that they've put out there, which very much contains the fact that there should be a ceasefire on all fronts. But I think as far as Israel is concerned, they've put out a statement from the Prime Minister's office saying, yes, we support the 2-week ceasefire. We support Donald Trump's efforts to negotiate an end to the missile, nuclear and terror threat coming from Iran. But Lebanon is not included in part of this. And we shall have to see whether that's palatable to the Iranians. Hezbollah is obviously an Iranian proxy. And I think Benjamin Netanyahu has used this opportunity of the war in Iran to try and completely knock out Iran's most significant, most powerful proxy on its northern border. But that's also already been causing a massive humanitarian crisis. You've got 1.2 million people displaced. You've had 1,500 people killed. You've had over 100 children killed. Israel's northern communities are still suffering attacks from Hezbollah. And Israel is trying to make sure that they don't have an evacuation from the north, as they did for many, many months after October the 7th, when Hezbollah started striking then. But you have IDF soldiers being killed in Lebanon. We went to talk to one family yesterday who'd had their 21-year-old son killed in the conflict. So this is going to be very, very difficult. Let's remember that the Israelis have been trying to hit Hezbollah and Palestinian militant groups in Lebanon before that. They've never managed to eradicate them for 40 years. So I don't really see Benjamin Netanyahu stopping now. And I also feel that, there is a real concern that, yes, the guns are silent for now, but if he feels that his goals aren't met, which they certainly haven't been, this idea that he will mow the lawn again in Iran, i.e. continue to try and degrade their missile capabilities as and when he sees an opportunity, will continue. I think it's important to say that Hezbollah, for now, has paused fire in the north. I haven't seen any alerts on my phone of sirens up in the northern communities, but we are expecting a statement from them. And I think given the IDF activity in southern Lebanon, you can be pretty sure that they will resume their bombing of the north and against IDF troops in the south of Lebanon too.
Details there from Diana Magne. Well, unsurprisingly, we've seen a big drop in oil prices since the ceasefire was announced. Brent crude currently trading at $94.47 per barrel, unsurprisingly as well, stock markets have jumped. The futures have jumped for the US. We've also seen rises in Asian markets. We'll wait to see how European markets react throughout the course of this morning. Well, earlier we spoke to maritime intelligence analyst Michelle Weiss-Bachmann, who told us that the shipping traffic in the Strait of Hormuz will take a while to return to pre-war levels.
Well, I think it's unclear at this stage whether freedom of navigation has really returned. And obviously, ship owners will need guarantees on the safety of their seafarers. They'll need to get marine insurance in place. Additional premiums, war risk premiums are very high. Remembering, of course, that it's going to take weeks, not days, to get oil and gas and ships out of the strait. And then it's going to take months, not weeks, to have oil trade come back to normal. There's just not going to be a rush of ships exiting, and especially when there's no certainty about whether or not traffic will return to that international corridor that was in place before the war.
Joined now by our military analyst, Professor Michael Clark. And Michael, I was tempted to ask you who's the winner out of this temporary situation, but I wonder if there's no victors, whether both can claim some successes, but whether this doesn't really have somebody coming out on top.
Well, Gareth, you're quite right. I mean, I said a couple of weeks ago that the only winners from this war are Russia and Israel. Everyone else is a loser. Iran loses in its own way. America loses in its own way. The Europeans lose. The Gulf states lose. The world economy loses. The global south loses. Everyone loses, apart from Israel, who's doing quite well with their own agenda, and Russia, who have won in several ways. And so the Iranians emerge from this, if this is the first round of a war, or if there's the complete war, we don't know. But the Iranians emerge from this dominant, politically dominant, and America emerges from this having achieved none of its objectives. And, you know, both sides can spin that in the way that they want. But if you look at what the Americans, what Trump said he was doing, he kept changing his mind on what the objectives seemed to be. But there are at least 3 or 4 things. So he said, you know, nuclear issues, that no nuclear weapon, no ballistic missiles or ballistic missiles above a certain level, no aid. Oh, thank you. Yeah, very good. No aid to proxy forces and regime change. Yeah. That's what he talked. Those are the 4 things he talked about. And on none of those 4 things has he got anywhere.
Nuclear material is still in Iranian hands.
Nuclear material is still there. It's buried somewhere, we think probably under Isfahan, but it might have been moved. Ballistic missiles, they've still got the capacity, they've still got them. And they've even this week have received 3 shiploads of chemicals from China for missile fuel. Not the fuel, but missile fuel. So the Chinese are still supplying them. They obviously think they can keep on building missiles. And they haven't addressed Israel's war on Lebanon, which will go on. The Israelis have said, this doesn't deal with us. We've still got a war on Lebanon, which they will prosecute. And, of course, the Strait of Hormuz, which wasn't a problem before the war, now is a problem. Because the Iranians are making very clear that they will keep some type of control over the Strait of Hormuz. And we haven't really seen what that is. They have no right to do that. The Strait of Hormuz is a completely independent free waterway. But what the Iranians have been doing, see Larak Island there, that's the toll booth. Where they've been letting ships through, they've been routing them not through the main channel, which is where that says Strait of Hormuz on our map. They've been making them go north of Larak Island to go round that little loop where they can have a good look at them. And that's the toll booth. That's when they go through there, that's where they, in a sense, after that, they pay their money. Now, if the Iranians keep on doing that, if they keep making ships go round Larak Island, then they're running the toll booth. And we'll see if they do or not. But the Iranians obviously feel that they can potentially close the Strait of Hormuz again at any moment. That wasn't the case before the war. It is now.
Just looking at marine traffic data, it's really interesting looking at how the ships are either side of the Strait of Hormuz. And you kind of have these groupings on either side here of the UAE, and it's ships at anchor. Yeah. If you hover your cursor over these ships, so many of them have been renamed to Chinese crew, China ship of Iraq, and effectively trying to show the ownership. Yes. To show that these are tankers without any political skin in the game of the war, at least. Exactly. Trying to get that passage through the strait.
And all of that legitimizes the Iranian regime. It gives them legitimacy over a waterway over which they have no legitimacy. It's an international waterway. They have no right to restrict shipping. But the more people rename their ships, the more they play the game that Tehran wants them to play, the more legitimacy they give to Tehran as a regime, as a government, and so on. The less the United States its military power has counted for less and less the more destruction they've done, because the Iranians are gaining legitimacy through this, not losing it. That's where we are at the moment. And interestingly, I haven't seen that before, but you see, there's Larak there, just near Keshim Island, just south of Bandar Abbas. See those three little red dots there? Those ships must be at anchor.
The bit kind of up here.
Can I stand up?
Yeah, can we
stand up and do this? Right, OK. So here is Larak.
We're on the move.
Yeah, here's Larak Island. So these ships are at anchor. But it's interesting that Bandar Abbas is a very important port. If these ships that are on their way, if they start routing north of Larak Island, it will show that the Iranians are still running the toll booth. If they move around the normal channel, which is here, this sharp turn, if they go back to doing this, then the Iranians can't really check them out very easily. If they make them go around Larak, then they're checking them out very carefully.
And this scene, this is live, actually. This is exactly what's happening in the Gulf, through the Strait, and then out into the Gulf of Oman. I wonder whether this will get back to normal levels within 2 weeks, or whether these ship owners, whether these insurers, whether these nations will go, we're going to still wait and watch, or whether the economic benefit of getting ships in and out is greater than the reticence to put yourself at risk.
Absolutely right. It's all about insurance. It's all about insurance and what the insurers are prepared to offer, and whether the ship owners will take the premiums that they're being offered. And you always find all these ships, the red ones, usually the red dots, are ships that are at anchor. And you always find, even in normal times, lots of ships at anchor on this side of the Gulf, this side of the Straits, and at anchor on this side, where the water is pretty shallow. I mean, down here, this water is only like 20 metres. Down here, it's more like 60 metres. So not many ships can anchor there, and the big ships can't. They have to keep going along, effectively, along by Kish Island, in Iranian waters. So you normally find lots of ships anchored there, but they're anchoring usually because they're waiting for a market, they're waiting to be sent to South America or wherever it is. Now their anchorages are concerned with renaming, as you say, renaming the ships, redesignating them so they can come through the toll booth if they're going this way.
We haven't seen the full details of exactly every specific line, sentence, dotted I, crossed T of this 10-point plan. Do you think there's any capacity within it, though, or within the tolerances of the Iranians to have some kind of patrol that would allow this to stay open, some kind of third-party intermediary force that might help police this situation?
They might. If they're clever, they will. Right. But they've established to the world that they can close the Strait whenever they want to. They never did that before. Nobody was sure if they would, and now they have, so they know they can do it, and the world knows they can do it. If they're sensible, they'd give this over to some sort of international management structure, which would be based on UNCLOS, the UN Conference on Law of the Sea, and the IMO, the International Maritime Organization, and it would be run internationally, and it would show them being very responsible and very international. But they probably won't. And the statements that Arashi has been making, the Iranian foreign minister, he's been saying, well, we will open the straits according to the requirements of our armed forces and technical, with due concern to technical considerations. There are no technical considerations. It's an open waterway. The ships should come and go this way, the way they normally did. I mean, what he's doing is introducing their conditions under which, of course, we'll open the straits as long as you play by our rules. And that's unprecedented. It's a very bad precedent for international law and for the Malacca Straits, the Straits of Taiwan, for the Channel. It's a bad precedent for all of the other straits in the world.
I'm just going to stop you there, Michael. I want to take our viewers to Hungary now. This is the Vice President of the United States, J.D. Vance, who is in the country supporting the re-election bid of the Prime Minister, Viktor Orban. J.D. Vance has just sat down on the podium. Let's take a listen to what he has to say.
We would like to have more time, but we have only 30 minutes, so I start immediately.
Sure.
Why did you accept our invitation to MCC? It's the first time that the US Vice President is coming to Hungary, that you are here, and you are immediately at MCC on stage with a conversation with us. Of course, as you know, MCC is an institution where we have more than 8,000 students in 30 centers all across the countries and in the neighboring countries. We also do a lot of research, a lot of events, and from the age of 10, basically till the PhD, till the end of the PhD studies, we have a lot of students. Why was it for you important to come to us?
Well, I'll give you two answers. So the first is that I was having lunch with Viktor Orban yesterday, and I said, what can I do to help? And he said, go and speak at MCC. And I said, okay. Teach me ever to ask that question again. But no, we're very excited to be here because it is such an important institution. And what I like about MCC is that it shows, I mean, I believe this was started in 1996, correct? And what I like is that educational institutions, there's this attitude that certain people have that they should be completely distinct from all democratic influence, from the sovereign will of the people. The idea that the university or the educational institutions stand completely apart and should just basically be able to receive unlimited funding from the taxpayer, even though they don't support the civilization that they were founded on, should receive unlimited resources and unlimited public support, even when they go at the very people that they ask that support from. And I think that what you guys are showing is that academic institutions are part of the civilization that gives birth to them. They're part of the people who actually fund and resource these places. And so what you guys have shown is that you can actually have a university that's committed to excellence, an academic institution, I should say, that's committed to excellence, where students from all walks of life, as you told me backstage, from very young students all the way up to PhD students, can come together, discuss ideas, debate ideas, have a free exchange and open debate amongst yourselves, but also be fundamentally committed to the values that actually make it possible for all of us to live in these great societies together. So much of the academy has tried to destroy the foundations of Western civilization. You can actually have an institution that tries to build up the foundations of Western civilization, that corrects what needs to be corrected, that changes what needs to be changed, but is fundamentally committed to the project that we want to have open debate. We want to have freedom of religion. We want people to walk down the street in public safety. We want borders. We want the type of economies that provide good lives and good wages to our people. Foundationally, it's kind of crazy that so many Western academic institutions are not committed to any of these values and yet expect public support. You guys stand in defiance of that, so I thought it'd be fun to come and spend a morning with you.
Thank you. I could talk for hours about MCC, but let's jump into political topics. You have now an issue in the United States that the Ukrainian intelligence services attempted an influence on the American elections.
Sure.
Can you a bit describe to the Hungarian audience what is this about? And why I ask it's because it's a topic as well in Hungary.
Yes.
The Ukrainian, we have this issue with the Druzhba pipeline, which is delivering oil through Ukraine to Hungary. Also, President Zelensky said that if Viktor Orban doesn't change his behavior, he will send his soldiers to his private address. So also we have an issue with this, this question of Ukrainian influence. What is the situation in your country, and how do you see this in Hungary?
So first of all, I wasn't even aware that Zelensky had said that he was going to send private soldiers to the Prime Minister's residence until yesterday. Victor actually told me that, and then I went and looked it up. Almost couldn't believe it's true, but it's true. It's completely scandalous. You should never have a foreign head of government or a foreign head of state threatening the head of government of an allied nation. It's preposterous. It's unacceptable. And what I find so interesting about, there's a lot of conversation about foreign influence in our elections. So you saw this back in 2016, where a lot of the American media said that it was a true scandal that the Russian government bought like $500,000 of Facebook advertisements during the 2016 campaign. And for what it's worth, I don't want Russia involved in our elections in the same way that I'm sure you don't want any other country involved in your elections. I've also been told that the Vice President of the United States coming and saying that Viktor Orban is doing a good job and is a helpful statesman to the cause of peace, that's foreign influence. But what's not foreign influence is when the European Union threatens billions of dollars withheld from Hungary because you guys protect your borders. That's apparently not foreign influence. What's not foreign influence is when the Ukrainians shut down pipelines, causing suffering among the Hungarian people in an effort to influence an election. That's allegedly not foreign influence. It doesn't pass the smell test. Foreign influence is when other governments threaten, cajole, and try to use economic influence to tell you how to vote. And that, to the Hungarian people, whether you like Viktor Orban or not, whether you agree with this or that policy, that is fundamentally an assault on your sovereignty. You know what I have never done, even though we have, of course, a lot of economic power in the United States of America. We are the economic and military superpower of the world. We have never threatened Hungary. saying, if you don't vote for Viktor Orban, you're not going to get this and this. We would never do that because we respect the Hungarian people enough to respect their sovereignty. The fact that so many foreign actors, whether they're transnational organizations like the bureaucrats in Brussels, or whether it's foreign governments, are literally threatening the Hungarian people, vote this way or we're going to exact our revenge on you, that should make you very angry. You should vote against that for the simple reason that you are sovereign in this country. One of the coolest things about my visit is, late yesterday, when it was closed down, we went and saw the crown of St. Stephen in the Parliament. And I love the symbolism of this, of course, because it's one of the oldest, maybe the oldest surviving crown that exists in Western civilization, but it's there at the center of the parliamentary building. What does that mean? That means that sovereignty rests with the Hungarian people. The people are sovereign in Hungary. But for that to be true, the Hungarian people have to reject these foreign influence operations, vote for who they want to be their leader, reject the Brussels bureaucrats.
You were talking about the influence from Brussels. It's also interesting how, for example, free speech is in danger. If you look on the tech companies
Sure.
and the influence on them from the Brussels bureaucrats, it's an important topic, it's an important question. But in connection to you, one of the largest Hungarian oppositional leftist mainstream press wrote that there is no Ukrainian or Brussels influence in Hungary, only Russian influence. Do you know this from somehow?
I had not seen that observation, but again, I find it darkly ironic that people are accusing me of engaging in some kind of foreign influence. All that we're saying is that Viktor Orban, he does a good job, because he does. He's a very, very important partner for peace with the American government, because he is. I hate to say this, because they're obviously much bigger economies, much more populous countries in Europe, but most of the European political capitals have not been nearly as helpful to the cause of peace between Russia and Ukraine as Viktor Orban has. And it's not because, by the way, I've sat in private meetings with Viktor where he has very, very capably summed up the Ukrainian position, where he said, this is what the Ukrainians care about, this is what the Russians care about, because if you want to make peace, you have to understand what the two parties to the conflict actually think. It's not a betrayal to try to understand where both the Russians and the Ukrainians are coming from. It's a necessary component to achieving a peaceful settlement. That's not Russian influence, that's a desire for peace. This is not American influence. Do you know how much, again, I would never do this, but you know how easy it would be for the United States to threaten Hungary economically in the same way the EU has? We would never do that because we respect our friends enough to respect their democratic will. What's going on in the EU, what's going on in Brussels, what's going on with some of these foreign influence operations, I'm telling you, it is a scandal. It's the reason why I'm here. This is unprecedented. It's unprecedented for an American vice president to come the week before an election. The reason why we're doing it is because we thought there was so much garbage happening against Viktor in this election that we had to show that there are actually a lot of people and a lot of friends across the world who recognize that Viktor and his government are doing a good job and they're important partners for peace. That's why we're here, but ultimately the Hungarian people are going to be sovereigns because that's how it should be.
We often hear that we are living in dangerous times. There is an ongoing situation in Iran now, but of course, which is next to our border, is the Russian-Ukrainian conflict. I think when you and President Trump won the elections, there was a window of opportunity to stop this. You tried to stop this, then it didn't happen. I think, and the Brusselian bureaucrats and the European elite said that, and somehow made the pressure that not to stop and not to...
J.D. Vance, the Vice President of the United States, on that second day of his tour to Hungary. It's in support of Viktor Orban, the incumbent Prime Minister of Hungary, who's been in power for 16 years, looking for another term in office. He is trailing in the polls, is Viktor Orban, by some measure of maybe even double digits. The election coming up in the next couple of days, so J.D. Vance has been in the country trying to bolster support for potentially the United States' strongest European Union ally. We heard there some of the traditional talking points decrying some of the institutions when they are academic institutions that namely don't go in the direction of travel that the governments would like to see them go in, and also talking about the support or lack thereof in the perspective and the eyes of J.D. Vance of the European Union to some of its member states. We'll keep a close eye, see if he touches on anything regarding Iran, regarding the ceasefire as well. I just want to bring you some details, actually, on the ceasefire. This is a post on X from Masoud Pezeshkian, the Prime Minister of Iran. The ceasefire, with the acceptance of the general principles desired by Iran, was the fruit of the blood of our great martyred leader Khamenei and the achievement of the presence of all the people on the scene. From today onward, we will also remain together, whether in the field of diplomacy, whether in the field of defence, whether on the street and whether in the arena of service provision. So they're noting the former Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, who was killed on the 28th of February by the United States in that strike on Tehran. And also they're talking about the ceasefire and the general principles desired by Iran. That would seem to point to the 10-point peace plan that the Iranians have put forward to the United States and also to Israel as well. Any reaction to that? We'll bring it to you. Let me just check the wires for a brief second. Just a couple of lines, actually, to bring you from Kuwait, saying that air defences, reportedly, according to the Kuwaiti army, are dealing with a wave of Iranian drone attacks since 8 a.m. local time. Kuwait says it's intercepted drones, some of which were targeting vital oil facilities and power stations in the south of the country. It's caused major infrastructure damage, according to the Kuwaiti army. This is being brought to us by the Reuters news agency. We're also just seeing here lines from the Kremlin saying that they welcome Iran's ceasefire after Tuesday's harsh statements, is the direct quote, by warring parties. So the Kremlin there also giving its perspective on the situation in Iran, saying that it hopes for direct Iran-United States contacts in the coming days to continue peace discussions, saying that it is welcoming that ceasefire situation. Well, here, Sir Keir Starmer's welcomed the announcement of a temporary ceasefire as well between the US and Iran in exchange for Tehran allowing more ships to pass through the Strait of Hormuz. The Prime Minister travelling to the Middle East today, expected to discuss ways to uphold the pause in fighting. Joining us now, Razgat Alani, the UK representative of the Democratic Party of Iranian Kurdistan. Good to have you with us. Appreciate you joining us from our Westminster studio. Your reaction to this announcement of this ceasefire between Iran and the United States, if you will.
Yeah, thank you for having me. The ceasefire, I think, is... let's go back a bit. Who caused this war? I think we believe that the Iranian regime caused this war. And this ceasefire, as long as the Strait of Hormuz is open, is good for economy in the Western. But how it works, negotiation hasn't started yet. If the negotiation go through, if any agreement or no, I think if the regime of Iran agreed in the demand of the Mr. Trump administration, is mean like the regime going to drink the poisons, which they should have done even before they caused this war. And we don't know so far. As I said, they exchanged the message until it came today. This is ceasefire for 2 weeks. But personally, I believe that it's not going to be any agreement in these 2 weeks, and the war will going to continue.
What will be your reaction if that war does continue, in your words? And what will be the reaction of the Iranian people? In many respects, this situation, whilst is ongoing and long-term, really heightened at the beginning of this year, following the protests, following the collapse of the economy, following food inflation at somewhere around 70%. We saw thousands, if not tens of thousands of people in Iran killed by the government in Iran.
Look,
what will happen next if peace isn't secured, if there isn't change?
Look, what happened the regime main fear is its own people. Which we know from that they closed down the internet and the crop regime. They don't have any answer for crisis of the water shortage and pollution or all economical issues in the Iran. The Iranian people, in this scenario, there is three parts. There is the American, Israel, and the people of Iran. Of course, American, they want to have a deal, a good deal. Israel, they looking for the long security in the Middle East, and they believing that with the current regime, they're not going to have a long-term security for themselves. And the Iranian people, they want a regime change. If you go back, if you look at the latest data from the Golan organization, which is in Netherlands, it says nearly 80% of Iranian, they want a regime change. But as you mentioned, are Iranian people, they can change the regime inside alone? No, they need help from outside, which is, it goes for years and years, the demonstration, the peaceful demonstration.
Razgar, my apologies, just pause 1 second. Just a bit of breaking news to bring our viewers here on Sky News. My apologies.
I do think there are good developments here. And let me just say a few things. First of all, what the president set out to do was decimate the Iranian military, decimate their ability to wage conventional war. And that military objective, as the president said yesterday, as I said yesterday, has been achieved. And because of that, what the president did is he basically issued an ultimatum to the Iranians. He said, open up the straits, stop trying to hold the world's economy hostage, and we'll engage in a ceasefire. And that's exactly the agreement that we came to last night. The Iranians have agreed to open up the straits. The United States has agreed to stop attacking. And that, not just the United States, but also our allies, have agreed to stop attacking. And that is the basis of this fragile truce that we have, which is now, 8 to 12 hours old. Now, here's what I'll say about this. I've learned a lot about the Iranian system and a lot about the way the Iranians negotiate. As the president told me last night, the Iranians are better negotiators than they are fighters. I'm sure they don't like to hear that, but it's true. But here's a couple things. So, one, just in the response that we've seen from various segments of Iran, you have on the one hand people within Iran who have responded very favorably. The foreign minister who said, look, we agreed to the United States' terms. We'll do a ceasefire, we'll do a negotiation, we'll open the Straits of Hormuz, and then we'll see if we can come to more agreement down the road. So some of the people have responded favorably and have said the right things. And then you have some people on social media within their system who are basically lying about what we've accomplished militarily. They're lying about the nature of the agreement. They're lying about the nature of the ceasefire. And so you have just, even within their system, and this is why I say this is a fragile truce, you have people who clearly want to come to the negotiating table and work with us to find a good deal. And then you have people who are lying about even the fragile truce that we've already struck. And that's just an interesting thing about their system. And the final point that I'll say about this is the President of the United States has told me, and he's told the entire negotiating team, the Secretary of State, the Special Envoy, Steve Witkoff, he said, go and work in good faith to come to an agreement. That is what he has told us to do. If the Iranians are willing, in good faith, to work with us, I think we can make an agreement. If they're going to lie, if they're going to cheat, if they're going to try to prevent even the fragile truce that we've set up from taking place, then they're not going to be happy. Because what the president has also shown is that we still have clear military, diplomatic, and maybe most importantly, we have extraordinary economic leverage. So the president has told us not to use those tools. He's told us to come to the negotiating table. But if the Iranians don't do the exact same thing, they're going to find out that the president of the United States is not one to mess around. He's impatient. He's impatient to make progress. He has told us to negotiate in good faith. And I think if they negotiate in good faith, we will be able to find a deal. But that's a big if. And ultimately, it's up to the Iranians how they negotiate. I hope they make the right decision.
We are here with a lot of talented Hungarian students. You talk a lot about education.
Yes.
How do you see the future of education? In which direction should it be developed? And do you know a bit the Hungarian education system, especially the tertiary education system, our university system? What is your opinion about this? And
caveated comments there, but JD Vance saying if both sides negotiated in good faith, he thought they could find a deal, saying that Donald Trump is impatient to make progress and that there were various levers that the United States could lean upon to force more change and force more concessions out of Iran. But he said that the president had told them not to use those at this time. He said that the truce was, in JD Vance's, the US vice president's words, fragile. He described it as a fragile truce and said that the Iranians were better negotiators than they were fighters in his regards. Let me just bring you the latest statements from Pakistan now. This is breaking news for the Prime Minister's office of Pakistan, saying that the Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif has had a conversation with Masoud Pezeshkian, the President of the Islamic Republic. During the conversation of 45 minutes, the Prime Minister conveyed appreciation for the Iranian leadership's wisdom in agreeing to the ceasefire and for accepting the Prime Minister's offer to host negotiations between Iran and the US in Islamabad later this week. President Pezeshkian, according to this readout from the Pakistanis, thanked the Prime Minister of Pakistan for the efforts of bringing about the temporary ceasefire between Iran and the United States, conveying his best wishes to the people of Pakistan and confirming that Iran would be participating in the negotiations in Islamabad. And both leaders agreed to remain in close contact. So that breaking news here on Sky News in the last few moments, hearing that the President of Pakistan has confirmed to the President of Iran has confirmed to the Prime Minister of Pakistan that Iran will take part in negotiations in Islamabad. They are slated to take place on Friday, the two sides thanking the other for the work that was done to secure the two-week temporary ceasefire between the United States and Iran. That is the latest. Also just seeing the Italian Foreign Minister has hailed the two-week truce, saying that Italy would do its bit for peace, saying the two-week suspension of fighting is a desirable agreement and a positive development. It all follows the president's announcement of that pause in fighting. And Tehran, like I say, is now saying it will reopen the Strait of Hormuz. We're joined now by Chief Safety and Security Officer at BIMCO, one of the largest international shipping associations, Jakob Larsen. Jakob, good to see you. I appreciate you joining us here on Sky News.
Thanks
to your understanding at this time, to what degree are ships either starting to make their way through the strait or preparing to do so?
I think most ships are now preparing to move through the strait, but I think ship owners are also looking for a little bit more clarity on the practical details of any transit regime established by Iran and or the US. So before we have some more technical details where the ships can go and with whom they should coordinate, I think we have to await that until or before ships can start to move through in any great numbers.
What are your members, what are the people that you're in contact saying to you about their primary concerns at the moment?
I think the primary concern is the stability of the ceasefire. As was also mentioned by the US Vice President, it is a fragile ceasefire. And if you look at the 10 points that Iran has put up as a starting point for negotiations, they do seem pretty far from the objectives of the United States before entering into the conflict. So what I fear is that the ceasefire will not last for long, but of course it remains to be seen. It depends on how willing the two parties are to bend towards each other to reach a compromise. But that's also the concern with the shipping industry, because if hostilities break out again, then we could very well risk a scenario where shipping again becomes the target of Iranian attacks.
There are reports that Iran would like to enforce a levy, a tax, a fee, whatever you want to describe it as $2 million per ship to pass through the strait. What's your reaction to those reports?
Yeah, I think they are interesting. To ask for a fee or not is really a political question. And for us in the shipping industry, what we basically do is we take note of the situation, and if there are requirements to comply with, then we will do what we can to comply. I think we have to keep in mind that a very large crude carrier, for example, carries around 2 million barrels of oil. So a levy on perhaps $2 million would not constitute a huge sum of money for a cargo of oil of that magnitude.
But perhaps for ships that have got bulk goods, container ships, ships that are carrying maybe lower value but higher volume items, that might constitute a bigger issue for them.
Yeah, I think that's a valid point, that for cargoes of lower value, then percentage-wise, the size of the levy would be bigger. Indeed, if they stick to the $2 million for such cargoes as well. But it could also be that they decide to apply a tiered levy structure. We don't know anything about it yet.
In an ideal environment, and I appreciate those things are few and far between, especially at sea, but in an ideal environment, how swiftly could normality resume in the Strait?
Yeah, I'm afraid it's going to take a while yet, because one thing is that we can have the ships currently trapped inside the Persian Gulf transit out, and for that they will need a sort of relatively stable ceasefire. But I think to persuade ships to come back in again and pick up new cargoes, we would require a little bit more stability. And when we will have that, that's really a good question. As you have guessed, it all depends on the outcome of the negotiations in the coming days. Chief Safety and Security Officer at BIMCO, Jakob Larsen, good to have you with us. Appreciate you joining us live here on Sky News.